Is Sony finally teasing the PS5 Pro? How's it going, guys, and welcome to PSReady, the channel all about PlayStation. And before I jump into it all, I want to let you guys know that this video is sponsored by me. Yes, I have so many links down in my description for any PS5 accessory you might need. There have been some big hardware news stories over the past couple weeks that really got me thinking. First one is this PS5 Slim that DIY Perks created. Basically what he did is he took apart the PS5, actually broke one, and had to use a PS5 that he was sent during the review period to get the motherboard for this slim PS5. He took the cooling out and made his own water cooling unit that hangs off of the back, and long story short, he made a 1-inch thick PS5. Now, the second news story that kind of got me thinking about a PS5 Slim or Pro is these new monitors and headsets from Sony. So on the headset side, we have the H3, the H7, and the H9, but on the monitor side, we only have the M3 and the M9. And when you look at the specs, it's easy to see why. The M3 runs at 1080p and the M9 runs at 4K. And in the middle there should be a 1440p monitor. And even though these monitors don't have direct PlayStation branding, visually, if you look at them, like you put them side by side with a PlayStation 5, they look like they use the same design language, because they do. They're both made by Sony at the end of the day. So if you had a 1440p monitor and a PS5 that can't output 1440p and Sony doesn't have an update ready yet, you can kind of see where I'm going here. That's probably why they're holding back this 7 monitor. And the reason I think that we'll eventually get it is because when they announced this whole InZone brand, they made it very clear that this is just the beginning of the product line. Like, these 3 headsets and these 2 monitors are the beginning for now. But as this year and next year go on, we're going to see even more PC peripherals coming from them, which is really cool. But all of those kind of have to work with the PlayStation 5. Like, if they release a keyboard and mouse, it'll work with the PS5 in games that support it. But again, if they released a 1440p monitor, it would need to work with the PS5. The other weird thing about these monitors is their refresh rate. So the 1080p one goes up to 240 hertz and the 4K one goes up to 144. That's pretty standard, but both of those are frame rates that, as far as I'm aware, the current PS5 doesn't support. And over on the Xbox side of the fence, there's something else going on that really got me thinking about the future of PlayStation. So just to preface here, the reason I'm applying this to PlayStation is because both the Xbox Series X and the PS5 use AMD APUs. Now, Sony worked with AMD to make their own version of it, and AMD worked with Xbox to make their own version of it. So it's not like the exact same chip, but Xbox just got functionality for FSR 2.0, which basically, if you don't know what FSR is, it's like the AMD competitor to DLSS. And if you don't know what that is, basically they're both technologies that allow games to run internally at lower resolution. So like if you set Ghost of Tsushima at 4K and turned on DLSS, it might run at 1080p internally and then upscale it with AI or an algorithm to look like 4K, getting things looking as good as possible. Now, FSR has always been a lot, like, noticeably worse than DLSS, but recently with 2 games that are heavily associated with PlayStation, they've used FSR 2.0, which is actually very close in picture quality to DLSS. Those 2 games, God of War and Deathloop. So to see AMD partner up with Xbox to bring FSR 2.0 to Xbox games, that's kind of crazy to me, and I think it's only a matter of time until we see it on PlayStation games, because it already is built in to actual PlayStation games that are just running on PC. So taking this big soup of all these ingredients that I've laid out here and stirring it up, mashing it all together, I think Sony is literally sitting here telling us what we can expect for the PlayStation 5 Pro. First of all, I think this thing is going to be able to support 4K very well. Like right now we can play 4K games, but it's usually upscaled, it's checkerboard upscaled, it's not running at 60 frames per second. So this new version of the PS5 that I think they're working on will probably support 4K, but with FSR 2.0 built into at least games like God of War Ragnarok. I bet it would come to something like Horizon Forbidden West. You'll probably see it in Gran Turismo 7 in a future update, Spider-Man 2, Wolverine, any PlayStation game you can think of could support this, and then you could run the game at 4K on your monitor and it'll look native, because internally it'll probably run at 1440p, and instead of being checkerboard rendered upscaled, it'll be using this FSR 2.0 technology, which looks a lot better at the end of the day. I could also see this new version of the PlayStation 5 supporting higher frame rates all the way up to 240, because if Sony is willing to hold back the 1440p M7 monitor until the PS5 gets an update to support it, I could see them forward thinking and releasing a device that using FSR 2.0 or even just running at 1080p or 1440p can get to higher frame rates like 144 Hz or even 240 Hz. Now for me, the perfect monitor here for a new PlayStation 5 or even the current PlayStation 5 would be one that's 1440p at around 32 inches, running at 144 Hz. That's basically the perfection zone. And if you can get their version of Dolby Atmos that Xbox has, but PlayStation has their own, or Sony internally has their own, basically the difference there is that HDR10 does it across the entire game's feed, and Dolby Atmos, or this new Sony version that's proprietary, does it frame by frame. Having that built into the monitor would be great. Also, if they're able to create an OLED version, but the main core tenets here I want are 1440p, high frame rate support, and utilizing FSR to get to those higher resolutions at high frame rates we haven't been able to see before. Because if you've never played on a PC and used DLSS, in a game that's well optimized on its own, like God of War is, the 2018 version, DLSS is a game changer. You can run God of War on a pretty mid-grade PC using DLSS, or now FSR 2.0, and you can run it at 4K, pretty much maxed out settings, and it looks very close to native, but you can pull a perfectly locked 60 frames per second, again, on a mid-range graphics card, which lines up very well with what we have in the current PS5 right now. So if we get that technology down the line, we could see these games that are optimized well on their own running even better with FSR. The reason I'm pointing out games that are optimized well on their own is that there are plenty of other games that use FSR as a crutch, like Deathloop is a great example. Running a native 60 frames per second in that game is very hard. It fluctuated on the PS5. Another great example is Dying Light 2. No matter what PC you're on, I have one with a 3080 in it, you need to use DLSS to get a locked 60 frames per second, and it really comes down to just bad optimization. They release the games too early these days, and it sucks. It hurts the overall game as a whole. Looking to the future even more, I'd really like to see more sizes with these monitors, and if they do sell well, I think Sony's going to do it. Like 27 inches is pretty standard, I would say. Like if you're a PC gamer who's looking for higher frame rates like 240 or 144 Hertz, 27 inches is generally what you're going to see. A lot of the competition goes for bigger sizes like 32 inches. There's also people who buy LG OLEDs that are 42 inches and put those on their desk. But for me, with the space I'm working with, 27 inches is honestly pretty solid. I have no complaints about that. I just think there are people out there who would like bigger size monitors. And also, if Sony can start working some of their TV technology into these things like OLED technology, that would be awesome, because going back to what I just said, people are already using LG OLED TVs as PC monitors. Imagine if Sony came out with an in-zone OLED monitor that you could just use as a PC monitor instead of planting a TV on your desktop. I'm also really interested to see if there's any partnership between this InZone brand and the PSVR 2. It would be awesome if we started getting some extra accessories for the PSVR 2 that are made by InZone, because they're using higher quality parts. They're basically picking and choosing the speakers from the WX1000 line of headphones that are so good, and they're also taking the active noise canceling. So if they can make a headset that kind of fits over the PSVR 2 and gives you this incredible sound that you're going to get from these H3, 9, and 7 headsets, that would be really cool to see as well. I know that internally they're kind of competing with Sony, because the middle line one, the H7, is directly competing with the Pulse wireless headset, even though the pricing is completely out of whack. But still, they should have some brand synergy there where you get these perfect on PlayStation features with these new monitors and headsets. I mean, hell, Sony's working on a DualSense Pro. We've known about that for a long time. What if InZone went the other way and they came up with a DualSense that's kind of stripped down? Like, it's only the most basic features of the DualSense, but it's wired, and it might not have the insane haptics, but it keeps the touch pads and the adaptive triggers. That would be really cool to see at a much cheaper price. I'm thinking of the 8-bit Do controller that Ray talks about all the time on Xbox Ready. It's basically their competitor to the Elite Series controller, but you can get it for around $40. I'd love to see something like that internal competition from Sony, now that they have this InZone brand that's making PlayStation accessories. And continuing to look to the future here, if Sony really doubles down and figures out how to get FSR implemented on the PS5, you know what that kind of future-proofs them for? A new handheld. The Steam Deck has FSR, it totally works fine in God of War. God of War uses FSR 2.0 super well on the Steam Deck. You can keep the resolution at 800p, but then internally you can set it to a lower resolution with FSR, but keep the settings higher, and it looks better, shrunk down, than it does on a TV because of that technology. And you can get really good frame rates, like 40 hertz at 40 frames per second, and it runs like butter. So if Valve is doing that with 2022 tech that's very similar to what's already in the PS5, like it's literally an RDNA chip, what is stopping Sony from developing a portable version of their chip and just having a handheld that can play these PS5 exclusive games, just using FSR to keep the frame rates nice and smooth as they are on their TV counterparts? There's so many different opportunities here Sony has for the future, but yeah, right now, it really feels like they are teasing a PlayStation 5 Pro. It feels like internally at Sony, everyone's getting ready for it. And I just can't stop thinking about that TCL leak where they said, yeah, in the next couple years, we are going to see a PS5 Pro. I know people are going to be up in arms about it because a lot of people still can't get PS5s, but at this point, Sony's got to either decide to stick with the current PS5 they have or potentially get lapped by other devices like an Xbox Series X Plus, which you know Xbox is working on. Like, Sony has to stay ahead, and that means they have to release a PS5 Pro probably a lot sooner than they would like. And that would also kind of explain why PS5s are so hard to get, because they're working on PS5 Pros and Slims at the same time. You know, it all kind of adds up, to me at least.